Okay, this video is a remake of my video on checkmate, and stalemate. So, in previous videos I covered that the king can move one square in each direction. And I've also covered basic moving and capturing, where I said you can't move a piece to a square already occupied by one of your pieces. Now, with the king, these are some additional rules for the king actually. The king cannot move to a square where it can be captured by another piece. This would be called moving into check. Remember, the goal of chess is to actually capture the king. You actually never do it. The king is considered in checkmate when the king is in check, meaning you're threatening to capture the king, and any square that you move to, your king will get captured. So effectively, you stop one move short of actually capturing the king in chess. But what is check? So, well, moving in the check, or maybe check itself, is a position where the king can be captured. So let's just first look at the white king here. Let's see where it can move. Well, it can't move here because this square is already occupied by a white piece. It can't move here because it's already occupied by a white piece, a pawn. Now, what about this square here? Well, it can't move here because this bishop, if it did, it could be captured by the bishop or actually by the rook. If it moved there, either one of these two black pieces could come and capture it. So the king is not allowed to move here, or else it would get captured. That would be called moving in the check. And the king can't also move here because it would get captured by the rook. The rook would just come capture it. So the only move the white king could move, if it wanted to move, would be to this square right here. Now, what about the black king? Well, it can't move here because there's a pawn there. What about to this square right here? Well, it can't move here, or else it would actually get captured by the white queen. And it can't move here for the same reason. The white queen would just come down and capture it. And it can't move here because, once again, the white queen would come and capture it. But it can move here because it's not occupied by a piece, and it's not moving into a position where it could be captured by another piece. So that is hopefully check and moving in the check. So your king is not allowed to move to a square where it could be captured. So what about check and checkmate? Well, let's say it's black's turn to move. Actually, black has a one-move checkmate. So let's just first cover check. And the move is moving the rook to here. And if black does move the rook to here, it's now threatening to capture the king. And in chess, anytime you move, and then the next move you're threatening to capture the king, like we are here, because if white makes another move, we just capture the king. It's called giving check. So here black has moved the rook to a position to where it's now threatening to capture the king on the next move, and that's called check. So white has to basically drop everything that it's doing and answer the potential capture of the king. So the question is, can the king get out of this check? And if it can't, it's called checkmate. And here are the three things. Or whoops, should have put that in the middle. If you're in check, these are the only three things you can do to get out of check. And if you can't do any one of these three things, you're in checkmate. You can move the king, you can block the check, or you can capture the checking piece. These are the only three ways to get out of check. And if you can't do it, you're in checkmate. So the question is, can we move the king? Well, like in my previous example, we can't move the king, can't move the king here or here because it's already occupied by a white piece, a pawn. We can't move the king here, or else we get captured by the rook. Now, we can't move here And that would actually be called capturing the rook, one of the three methods. But if we did capture the rook, we'd be immediately captured by this bishop over here. So we actually can't capture the rook because that'd be moving in the check. If we capture the rook, the bishop would just come down and capture us. So we can't move there. So we can't capture. And now we can't move to this square, because if we did, then the rook would just capture us. So, and we can't block. Remember, one of the things I said is block. Now there's no square in between the rook and the king, so there's no possibility of blocking. So the king can't move, it can't capture the rook, and it can't block. So actually white is in checkmate. Okay, so let's back up. Let's say it was white's turn. I know that we're just using this setup to look at different examples. Okay, so let's say white decided to come down and put the queen here. The question is, and this would be giving check, white is checking the king because it's threatening. If black made in some other move, it would capture the king on the next move. So white is actually checking the king because it's threatening to capture the king on the next move. The question is this checkmate? Can black get out of check? Now, we've already discussed it can't move here because this is can't move to a square occupied by a piece. It can't move here because actually it would get captured. This is a square to where the rook could capture it or the queen could capture it. It can't move here because if it moved there, the queen would just come and capture it. And black cannot capture the queen, okay, because the king could move to this square, capturing the queen, but then the rook on the next move would capture the king, so it can't capture. But the king can move to this square, because this is a one square away. It's not occupied. It's not jumping over a piece. And there's no white piece that could capture it. So actually the king can move. This is not checkmate. This is only a check. So basically my three things, black can move the king. It cannot block because there's no square between the king and the queen. And it can't capture the checking piece, which is the queen. But it can move the king. So then the king would just move to here. Okay? Okay, I've set up a new position, and I want to discuss stalemate. Stalemate is basically when one side has no legal move, that is stalemate, and the game is considered a draw. Basically, if you give your opponent stalemate, meaning you give your opponent a position where he has no legal move, you almost get punished with a draw. In many cases, the person that ends up being stalemated probably had a losing game and ends up getting stalemated. So basically, when you have no legal move or your opponent has no legal move, the game is a stalemate and considered a draw. So in this position, it is white to move, and white has an easily won game if you don't know. This is a very easy win for white, but white is going to make a mistake, and no, actually, it's black to move, and white has a very easy won game. So let's see how white makes a mistake and stalemates black. Well, let's look at the board. Well, let's look at the king here. The king actually has no legal move. It can't move to here because it would be captured by the queen. Can't move here, it would be captured by the queen. Can't be moved here, it would be captured by the queen. So the king can't move. So the only thing that the black can do is that it can move its pawn. So it will do that. So black can only move the pawn. It can only move the pawn one square here. So that's black's only legal move. And now white makes a mistake and moves this pawn right here. This is stalemate. Actually, my computer just told me it was stalemate. Because why? Well, we already discussed the king cannot move. And now this pawn cannot move. So black actually has no legal move. It can't move, and it's black's move, so the game is actually stalemate. So white should not have moved this white pawn. It should have made a different move. But if white moved the pawn, the game is stalemate. So that is what stalemate is. So then that concludes my lecture on check, checkmate, and stalemate.